Hello, and welcome to my Battle for Azeroth preview of the Fire Mage. Now, this isn't a video I thought I would be making because, well, I pretty much suck at playing mages, and Fire Mage is probably the second worst spec I'm at, right in front of Arcane Mage. But I figured since I was testing things out on the alpha here and then on the beta, that I'd give the Fire Mage a try, and I have to say that I have been pleasantly surprised with what I've found. With that, let's take a look at some of the abilities. Arcane Intellect has made a triumphant return. Buffs in general are making a return in Battle for Azeroth, so now mages are a must-have in any group, but to be honest, mages are usually present in any group anyway, so this is one of those abilities that is a refreshing return. It gives you 10% intellect for 1 hour for all party or raid members. Blazing Barrier. Blazing Barrier is very similar to what it is on live. Absorbs damage, deals damage to melee attackers. Blink, still pretty much what Blink does. Combustion. Combustion engulfs you in flames for 10 seconds, increasing your spell's crit chance by 100% and granting you mastery equal to 50% of your critical strike stat, and is castable while casting other spells, so it's off the global cooldown, which is everybody's most favorite topic when it comes to Battle for Azeroth. By the way, mastery is ignite, so your target burns for an additional 18.6% over 9 seconds for the total direct damage caused by your fireball, Fire Blast, Scorch, Pyroblast, and Flame Strike. If this effect is reapplied, any remaining damage will be added to the new Ignite. And that mastery, that percentage, I believe, is based on, well, is based on a broken tooltip because, I was clicking on the wrong thing. Nope, it's right. My mastery is at 18.64%. So based on however much mastery you have, your combustion will give you 50%, will grant you an additional mastery equal to 50% of your critical strike chance, and since my crit is 42%, 50% of that would be 21, so an additional 21% mastery, which is not bad. It'll make stuff hit for a little bit harder. Next we have Conjure Refreshment. It's pretty much the same as it was. Counterspell, same, interrupts. Dragon's Breath, pretty much the same, does fire damage, disorients. Any damage that you do will cancel the effect. Fire Blast, blasts the enemy for 999 fire damage, has 2 charges, about a 10-second recharge time, always a critical. This is basically what keeps up your rotation as far as hot streaks go. Fireball is your casted filler spell. It's going to be your source of one of your sources of hot streak, and it can have some other interplay depending on some of your talent choices, which we'll go into a little bit later. Flame Strike is your AoE. Burns the area. It's for 763 fire damage and reduces the movement speed by 20% for 8 seconds. I don't know if it does that on live, but it's nice that people will stay in that area while they burn alive. So Frost Nova, pretty much the same. It freezes enemies in place, deals little damage, 62 frost damage, and stuns for 8 seconds. Damage interrupts the freeze effect. Well, it doesn't stun, it freezes them in place. I don't know what if that's a snare or whatever you call it, but it does what it does. Ice Block does what it does also. It prevents protecting you from all attacks for 10 seconds. During that time, you can't cast, attack, or move. It causes hypothermia, which means you can't get it again for 30 seconds. And it has a 4-minute cooldown. So, yeah. I always thought that was weird. You can't cast Ice Block again for 30 seconds, but you can't cast Ice Block anyway because it has a 4-minute cooldown. So that's very helpful information to have on the tooltip. Next is Invisibility. Invisibility basically pulls you out of combat, turns you invisible for 3 seconds, reducing threat each second. While invisible, you're untargetable by enemies. Lasts 20 seconds. Taking any action cancels the effect, and it's on a 5-minute cooldown. Sheep is pretty much what it is. Polymorph. It only works on beasts, humanoids, and critters. It's your CC. Damage cancels the effect. Limit 1. Portal lets you teleport. Right now, it only lets you teleport to Stormwind. And yeah, the other side of that is Teleport, which Portal is for anyone in your group. Teleport's just for you. Teleport is currently broken. you do not teleport anywhere. Pyroblast is your huge nuke, pretty much the same as it is. Of course, with the number squish, the damage is less, but it's your big nuke. It's got a long cast. You're usually only going to be casting it when you have a hot streak proc, except in a certain circumstance, depending on your talents, which we'll get into in just a bit. Next is Scorch. Scorch is castable while moving. It's a fast, low mana cost, low damage spell. It's essentially going to be a filler while you're moving. Slow Fall does what Slow Fall does. Spell Steal does what Spell Steal does. Time Warp, you still have your Heroism / Bloodlust. For your Mage, it does what it does. Cauterize is now a baseline ability. I believe it was a talent before, and it's a little bit different. It's fatal damage instead brings you to 35% health and burns you for 28% of your maximum health over 6 seconds. And during this time, your movement slowing effects are suppressed. Your movement speed is increased by 150%, but it can only occur once every 5 minutes. So it's kind of like a lifesaver kind of thing. Next is Critical Mass. Your spells have 15% increased chance to deal a critical strike, and you gain 10% more of the critical strike stat from all sources. Basically, this is going to be your go-to stat, probably to a certain extent. Next is Enhanced Pyrotechnics. Each time your fireball fails to critically strike a target, it gains 10%, increasing critical strike chance, and it basically cancels when you do get that crit. So this is only going to happen once. My crit's at 42%, but I imagine that the more gear you get, it's probably going to drop off just like it does every expansion. Next is Hot Streak. Hot Streak is basically the core of the whole spec. Getting to direct damage, critical strikes in a row will make your next Pyroblast or Flame Strike spellcast instant and causes double normal ignite damage. So that's generally why you want to get that right after you want to. Well, I guess Combustion doesn't do the same thing as it did before, but that's when you generally want to cast that. And your Mastery is now, like I said before, is your Ignite is essentially your Mastery. Didn't see Combustion on here. I must have skipped over it. Combustion, or I'm an idiot and I talked about it and I just can't remember because this video is too long. With that, let's move into the talents. The first row talents I don't like at all. All these talents seem very inconsequential and none of them seem very good. Firestarter, your Fireball and Pyroblast spells always deal critical strike when target is above 90% health. This is only good for a very limited portion of any fight. Probably be a little bit better on raid fights, but I don't know how well that's going to do for leveling up. But when you look at the other ones, it doesn't seem quite so bad. Pyromaniac is casting Pyroblast or Flame Strike while Hot Streak is active. Has an 8% chance to instantly reactivate Hot Streak. 8 whole percent. That is phenomenal. I don't think that makes it worth having. And finally, Searing Touch. Scorch deals 150% increased damage and is guaranteed a critical strike when the target is below 30% health. So you're going to have Scorch be part of your execute phase for a Mage. Yeah, that only does very minimum damage, 246 fire damage. I don't see that as viable either. Firestarter, at least it'll get your critical strikes going, and once you kind of get into a rhythm with them, it kind of sets up the rest of your rotation. So I go with Firestarter. Next row is these are kind of your movement kind of PvP type stats. None of them are really going to help your DPS that much. Except for Blast Wave, it's the only one that actually does damage, so that's why I take it. It causes an explosion around yourself, dealing 625 fire damage to all enemies within 8 yards, knocking them back and reducing movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. So this actually does damage. It can save your life if you're getting surrounded by mobs. That's the only reason why I take it. All the rest of the spells are good for movement, running away, if running away is your goal. Shimmer replaces Blink. Teleports you 20 yards forward unless something is in the way. It's unaffected by the global cooldown. Again, everyone's favorite topic. And now it has 2 charges and is castable while casting. Blazing Soul, it causes casting Blink will cause a blazing barrier to ignite around you, which is kind of good, I guess. But I mean, like I said, none of them are really going to affect your DPS. Next row is kind of interesting. Incanter's Flow is going to be, I think, your go-to when you are really just don't want to have to think about your DPS. realistically you're going to get a 4% increase in damage that cycles every 10 seconds up to 20%. Yeah, it's good extra damage. You don't have to think about it, but if you're trying to min-max on this, you could lose out if you're not doing it absolutely perfect. If you don't want to think about it too much or anything else, this is your go-to if you don't really care what you get. Mirror Image is on a 2-minute cooldown. It creates 3 copies of you that attack for 40 seconds. Yeah, it's not very strong. It's not been very strong for a while now, so yeah, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown. Rune of Power, you got 2 charges. It's a 1.25 second cast, 40-second recharge time. Places a rune on the power, Rune of Power on the ground for 10 seconds, which increases your spell damage by 40% while you stand within 8 yards. I don't like this because you have to be standing underneath it. I don't like this because you have a cast time, and I don't know. It doesn't synergize well with me, but I'm going to pick it because of that 40% boost to your damage. And when it couples with some of the other spells a little bit further down, it hits really hard. Next row, two of these are pretty good, but it's going to come down to preference and how you want them to play in your rotation. Flame On reduces the cooldown of Fire Blast by 2 seconds, increases the maximum charges by 1. Right now, Fire Blast has 2 charges, and it has about a 10-second recharge. So you'll get an 8-second recharge and 3 charges of it. Not too bad. It's viable. It could be done, but I think Phoenix Flames is a little better. This is basically your artifact weapon ability. It hurls a phoenix that deals 1041 fire damage to the target and splashes 278 fire damage to other nearby enemies. Always deals a critical strike, and it has 3 charges. And it doesn't cost any mana. So this is good for keeping up your hot streaks. It does really good damage. It does splash damage, and when you have this and Fire Blast, you're gonna always be able to keep crits up. And yeah, it makes the spec flow a lot better. Alexstrasza's Fury, Dragon's Breath always critically strikes and contributes to hot streak. If you are going to be using this with any kind of regularity on a 20-second cooldown, you are playing the spec wrong. You don't want your targets to be that close to you to where you need to be hitting them with Dragon's Breath. I wouldn't pick this. I don't see how this is useful in any situation. The next spells, these are kind of more movement speed / protection / control. Not really any of them matters. I just picked Frenetic Speed because it goes along with, the fire motif, I guess you would say. You could get another charge for Frost Nova, which isn't bad. Ring of Frost is good when you need to CC large areas, a large area of enemies. It's situational, but none of these are really going to contribute to your damage in any kind of meaningful way. Next row, these are more of your AoE. Flame Patch is Flame Strike leaves a patch of flames which burn enemies within it for 664 damage over 8 seconds. If you've got a large group of enemies that are going to be live long enough to be able to take that damage, and you're getting good enough procs on it, I guess this could be viable. The damage is just really kind of low, and Flame Strike in general doesn't do a whole lot of damage itself, so AoE is not really the bread and butter of the fire spec. If you want AoE, you're probably going to want to do Frost. Other one is Unstable Magic. Fireball has a 25% chance to explode on impact, dealing 40% additional damage to the target and all other enemies within 8 yards. So you've got a 1 in 4 chance to do an additional 40% damage to your main target, which is good in single target, and it can do damage to other enemies as well. It's good. It's random. I guess it's okay. It's splash damage. Your enemies have to be. It's not bad. It's passive, so you don't really have to worry about doing anything. And if you're really wanting to keep things super simple, this is your go-to one. I kind of like Living Bomb. I like the idea of Living Bomb. It doesn't do very much damage at all. It does 331 fire damage over 3.3 seconds, then explodes to deal an additional 194 fire damage to the target and all other enemies within 10 yards. The damage on this is not very good. Other enemies hit by the explosion also become a living bomb, and it can spread further, so this could be multiplicative. But again, the damage is super low. I only like picking this because it gives me another button to press so my rotation isn't like essentially between 3 and 4 buttons. It's just another thing to press, another thing to think about, which makes it a little bit more interesting. This next row, kindling, your fireball, pyroblast, fire blast, and phoenix flames critical strikes reduce the remaining cooldown on combustion by 1 second. That's a lot of things, but it's 2 minutes. That's 120 seconds. That's a long time to be doing stuff. It does not seem worth it to me. Next is Pyroclasm, which is the one I like a lot. Consuming Hot Streak has a 15% chance to make your next non-instant Pyro Blast cast within 15 seconds deal 300% additional damage, maximum 2 charges. Now, this is where you make your money, and this is where you're going to hit really, really hard. For one, this does this passively, which means you can keep your regular rotation, and you don't really have to. This is not your whole rotation is not dependent on this. But when you do get a proc, you can be assured that it's going to hit very hard. And that's why I like it. It's, yeah, Pyroblast has an insanely long cast time, but it's worth it. And especially if you're in a good rhythm by the time, I don't know, you're using Time Warp, that cast time is going to be significantly faster, and it's going to hit hard, very hard. I thought Meteor might be good, but it's kind of more just for AoE. If you're really desperate, if you're in a situation where you need AoE, this is probably going to be your one. Maybe if you're doing dungeons with lots of ads and you really want to do the AoE, this is going to be your AoE spell. And it'll probably would couple well with Living Bomb. And if you're really going to just try for AoE damage, you can get your Blast Wave in, because Blast Wave does hit all enemies within 8 yards, knocking them back. And you can then throw in your Dragon's Breath. But something about being a mage and being in close quarters with that which is trying to kill you just doesn't, it doesn't mesh well with the whole class fantasy, if you will. But this is the general spec that I use for single target and just to test out damage. So now that we've gone over all the talents, I'm going to let you see what it looks like, give you an idea on the rotation. I'm probably not going to do this to the best of its ability because I don't play a mage, and I'm sure there's lots of other people out there that are better than me. Plus, no add-ons, and I don't have my keybind set up, so if you hear clicking, forgive me. But I'm just basically going to start off with the Fireball. I'll Fireball again. It's got a hot streak. I'm going to hit the blast. It's going to flow real easily, and you could just keep casting if you're really into it, and you can double them at the same time. But what I really want to get is, that's what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to cast this. Now I'm going to hard cast my Pyroblast, and yeah, it takes a long time, but watch how much it hits for. With that rune, it hit for 19k, and then I coupled it up, and you can just keep this going really well. I mean, if you want to blow through all your charges, there it goes again. I got another charge here. And yeah, back to back, and look, it keeps coming. Yeah, my it ran out, but still 19k. That is the biggest crit I've seen in all the classes that I've been testing. And you look at damage. This is my damage meter right here. I'm playing. I just did the intro quests for the the Lordaeron intro quest line, so I have my Heart of Azeroth. I have one of my Azerite gear, so I'm not bare minimum, but he's doing 4k burst is really good. It's the best I've seen in any class that I've tested so far. Granted, I have not tested them all, but look at how often this thing is proccing, and even when I don't have the rune active, it still hits for 13k. And I mean, that's good damage right there. And you can just, if you really want to just keep this going, you can play it fast and get those procs. And I'm not even using all my abilities well. So I mean, if I can do this and I can crank out 4k consistent DPS while talking and making this video, this is going to be a fun spec to play. I know everyone's thinking, oh, they're probably going to nerf it, and I'm sure they will, but it flows pretty well. I like it. I like it a lot. I like seeing those big crits. But with that being said, I'm going to give you a little bit of footage now from actually doing some questing and let you see what it looks like to kill actual mobs and not dummies. Alright, now we are in here to do some killing of some mobs that are actually in the game in the beta right now, just to give you an idea on how the spec plays. So I'm going to start off putting my blazing barrier on, get a good distance away, and start with my rotation. Yeah, the spells are not hitting particularly hard, so I got to keep at max distance to be able to make sure that I'm killing stuff. So yeah, it's a good thing I have that blazing barrier, otherwise I'd be getting hit really hard right now. Ooh, it looks like they put in mines into the game for miners. But I'm just going to kill a couple more things, see how it plays. I was hoping I might get a proc, but doesn't look like that's going to happen. Just to kill a few more things. You can tell right now that the spells, they're not going to one-shot by a mile, and my build that I have right now is probably going to play better in a, ooh, look at these mobs. Get away. Yeah, we might want to utilize some AoE here. Ooh, look at that, I leveled. Alright. Look at that juicy trash loot to sell in the sell to a vendor. Well, that is pretty much it. Just to give you an idea on how the spec plays and what to expect when you get it. If you like this video, you want me to do more videos for different specs, please leave a comment. Tell me which spec you want to see some testing on. I'll give you my thoughts on it. Mainly, I've been doing classes that I want to give, you know, that I like, that are positive, but I am more than willing to find a class that sucks balls and shit all over it. Thank you again for watching, and see you later.